by the guy who wrote Holes, and he also wrote that became the movie with Shia LaBeouf. And a few other, just like a Roald Dahl.
A Nickelodeon original, if I remember correctly.
I don't think so.
The movie Holes wasn't produced by Nickelodeon.
I don't know, but he, for the first time in like 25 years or something, he came out with a new installment like a couple weeks ago. And there's a character in it who has to read. He's a little boy in a school, and he has to read a 999-page book. And it's like a subplot through the rest of the story, how hard it is for him to do it. But it keeps going back to his like trying to read this 999-page book. He's like, 10 or 9 or something. And I love it because at a point he starts to realize that he's very invested in the characters and he wants to know what happens next. And all of a sudden he realizes he wants to read the next page. And then he wants to read the next page. And it becomes this thing where it's like he wants to know what happens next. And basically it becomes this thing of his like love affair of the book, and he actually gets into the story. And then like through the rest of the book, when all the other characters are doing stuff, like he's always reading that book because like he's really gotten into it. And it's like this sort of thing that happens by accident. But the guy who wrote it like basically completely nailed like what it is to actually be into reading for like kids. It's just, I was like, oh my, like what a great way of explaining how to read for kids. Like at some point you might actually like what you're reading and it's not hard anymore. You want to just keep reading because
that's how it always is if you, and some extent, like writing too, like there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I don't want to fucking put my pen to this paper or whatever. But like, as soon as you get started, you're like, holy shit, I'm like way into this idea and I want to keep exploring it. And like you said, with reading, it's like, once you get to that certain point where it's like, it's got its hooks like in you, you don't want to put the book down. I can't tell you how many times I've stayed up like all night just reading a book, and the next thing I know, the sun's peering through the window because the book just got that good.
Yeah, with writing too. When friends of mine ask me, because I don't really get writer's block per se, so when friends ask me about that, even other writer friends, how I do that. Some of it is I just explain the language, and some of it's the way you talk about it. And I think you kind of nailed it implicitly, which is you don't have to write. You get to write. And I wake up sometimes, I'm like, I don't have to write. I get to write. How awesome is that?
What a dream job, right? Yeah.
But like, even when you're not like, most of the time, I'm not writing for money. And even when I am, it's not a lot and it's not ever worth it. Like even was probably my biggest paycheck. Trust me, I should have gotten like a lot more money than I got. But it's still just like, you keep that attitude in your head. And I think we might have talked about this before, Miles. I can't remember, but I saw this great interview between Fran Lebowitz and Toni Morrison, obviously before she died. And Fran Lebowitz, frankly, said it outright. And Toni Morrison was agreeing with her, which was like, she doesn't understand friends of hers who have so much trouble writing. It's like, if you have that much trouble writing, like maybe you shouldn't be writing. Like it shouldn't be that hard. Like it's not for everybody. Like I have a lot of trouble playing basketball. I'm not going to like try to be a professional basketball player. Like I like screwing around on my ukulele, but like I'm not going to try to go like make a record or be a ukulele player. And there is a point to it's like, why is it that everyone thinks they A, can write, B, have to write, C, should write? Like it's not for everybody. Like not everyone's going to play football. Not everyone's going to play basketball. Not everyone's going to climb a mountain. Like it's not for everybody. And like if it's that hard, why do that to yourself? Why force yourself into doing something you hate or you're not good at or you don't like? Like that's the thing of it I don't understand. So when I read interviews, especially today with like filmmakers especially or writers, whatever, it's so hard, the blank page. I'm like get out of the way for the rest of us who like can't stop doing it. Like some of us are writing and some of us like
you're like a dam in the river. Like let the river flow, man.
Get out of the way. Oh my God, like maybe you shouldn't be doing this again. Like it's really hard for me to play basketball too, but I'm not trying to get in the NBA and like using some kind of like nepotism to get in there and be in the way of somebody who like plays basketball for 7 hours a day. Like
you're not like shooting up at like Madison Square Garden while the Knicks are warming up, trying to like actually make a career out of things.
Right. It's a weird thing with writing. It really is. It's like with writing, it's like everyone thinks they can do it. Everyone thinks they're supposed to, especially write their novel or whatever. And it's like it's just not for everybody. And like go draw a picture, go play an instrument, go do. It's like. I don't know. So it's weird. It gets frustrating because I feel sometimes like Salieri, where like I can't stop doing it, and I have so much trouble getting stuff out there sometimes. And then other people who are like can do whatever they want because they're a celebrity or they're the son or daughter of somebody. Oh, it's so hard. I can't figure it out. It's like, then don't do it anymore. And you're taking up space for those of us who are manically doing it all day long.
I think from like the comedian perspective too, a lot of comedians like the idea of like calling themselves a writer a lot more than they actually like writing. Like that's just like I don't know. It's almost something like they can slip into a conversation like over a drink. Like I'm a writer. It's like, are you though? Like you tell poop jokes, bro.
Well, they have you the distinction really well in that fantastic oral history that Tom Shales and I think Andrew Miller's his name did of Saturday Night Live, the Live from New York book. And, you know, there was a point at Saturday Night Live where it really was, there was a really good hierarchy of not all the performers did writing and not all the writers performed. And in fact, it was done in a really straight lined way. And like, again, like some of those performers became like, you know, the people who created modern comedy performance, and some of those writers became the best comedy writers, who many of whom are still working and living and created some of the best films and books and whatever today. And it's like, you know, that's on a project with people. I always have to tell them like, I'm of like the 60s and 70s school. Give me a hierarchy. Fuck auteurism. I don't need to do everything. Like, I'll do this, you do that. Like, everybody does the thing that they're best at, rather than everybody trying to do, you know, everything. Because then we're all stepping over each other, and its ego gets in the way. I love writing something and watching it turn into something else with a group of people that I enjoy working with. And, you know, that's part of the fun of it, you know, and it's going to change and it's going to evolve and whatever. And, you know, that's you know, it's a bit of a lead in to what happened with the Seagal movie. That's a different, you know, sometimes things go horribly awry, but normally
so actually,
the hierarchy. Yeah.
Since you brought that up, and actually the whole SNL thing is such a perfect way to get this thing kicked off, because I definitely want to talk about Steven Seagal's infamous SNL appearance on this episode today as well. But Malcolm, if you want to hang out and stay, man, you are more than welcome. But what we are here to do today, this show is called Mr. Most Days Off Loves Everything, which today I struggled with, to be honest, Matt. I almost should have just like been like, I'm a fan of Matthew Klickstein for this episode, because I am definitely not a fan of your film Against the Dark.
I mean, neither am I, and I wrote the fucking thing, technically.
I need to watch it.
You really don't, my friend. You really don't.
If you haven't seen it, you won't understand any of it.
If you've survived the last 11 years without it coming across your screen somewhere, like you're myself to sit through it.
Piece of shit.
I even when I was like advertising for this today, I'm like, my buddy Matthew Klickstein has done so many awesome projects, like, you know, Slime, the book that introduced me to your work, which I absolutely love, and I still want to have you on to talk about Nickelodeon one day. Obviously, Springfield Confidential, which we talked about in great detail and is a fantastic read. On Your Mark, which I wore my Double Dare shirt today in honor of that. I love that film and think everyone should see it. But also, you wrote this piece of shit in 2009.
Sort of. That's what we're gonna do. I kind of wrote it. I never got the credit for it, for good or ill.
You're on IMDb for it, my friend, which I think is cool in its own right. So I mean, that's really fun. But so Against the Dark, it's a 2009 film starring a out of shape Steven Seagal, who is, it's actually it's about a world pandemic, which is kind of fitting for 2020. I know you're a sightseer, but this pandemic turns people into like vampire zombies ish.
You're as good as mine. I don't know the goddamn thing. I don't know.
So let's go all the way back and tell me what Against the Dark was when it was on paper coming off of your pen.
I like to talk about a great deal. So Against the Dark was originally Last Night, which was a script idea that I still think would make a great film, especially right now. You could literally make it right now, and it's deals with a lot of stuff that's going on right now. And I've tried in the past to maybe do other versions of it, but honestly, I don't even know how the copyright works because technically it's already been made. As something. This is what happened, and I will try to be as concise as possible, which anybody who knows me or has seen me on any of these things knows I'm terrible at, but I will do my best to be concise. I went to film school at USC, ostensibly the #1 film school in the country, which means the world. Did not find it to be that when I was there. Certainly did not find the other students that I was with to be even remotely good at anything. I don't think anybody that I graduated with has done anything. And the fact that I'm probably the most successful person from our graduating class says a lot. And I'm not that successful. But anyway, so
I would disagree with that point. You've got a lot of great work under your belt, and you're just getting started. But please continue.
I'm old at 38 in the industry, that's for sure. But the point of the story is, and I thank you, Miles, for saying that. The point of the story is I did meet a couple of people who were pretty great. One of them was this guy named Tor Knos, who was in this really specialized film business program. It was extremely exclusive. I think something like 6 people got in every year. One of the other people had worked already with Jay Leno or something. It was a very, very exclusive, like you are going to be working in the industry type of program. And he was friends with my best friend in film school and my roommate for pretty much the whole time I was there. And we actually did not get along that well, Tor and I. We kind of got on each other's nerves. We weren't really that close, but we had a mutual friend that we had in common. And more importantly, we respected the shit out of each other. He really appreciated my writing. Even at that time, within the film school, I had a bit of a reputation, both as an asshole, surprise, but also as somebody who wrote very fast and wrote a lot and did a lot of things and was always working on films and doing like poetry nights and all these other things, setting up all these things. I was just a manic, crazy person even then. I was basically the same as I am now, except 18, so I had a lot more energy. So people knew who I was. So he was made aware of me through that. And I respected him because he was in this extremely super elitist, elite, exclusive program there, and was also doing a lot of stuff even in film school. I think he produced 1 or 2 like feature films that actually came out and all this stuff. So we kind of respected each other, even though we didn't really know each other that well or like each other that much. When we graduated, I had written, I kept writing spec scripts. I was writing spec scripts constantly. And he read one of them and really liked it a lot. It's a script I still try to pass around to this day, and loved it and wanted to work with me on something. He loved it so much that he actually felt bad about our mutual friend who was also a writer and told me not to tell him that he wanted to work with me because he was better friends with this other guy. And so I knew like this was not about our friendship, which we didn't really have. It was about he really liked my script. So he sat me down and he had this terrible idea about making a movie about not necessarily vampires, but people who sucked out the water of other people. He actually gave me a book to read about the water shortage in LA that I think had something to do with Chinatown, the movie Chinatown, and how there was a water shortage in that or something. It was really didactic and kind of illogical and silly and weird. But I wanted to work with him, and he had a little bit of money and he had some clout, and I said, all right, let me give it a shot. And we started talking, and over a few months, we of course developed it into a more traditional vampire movie. But I read the history of vampires. And I read Richard Matheson's original novella of I Am Legend, which I love and highly recommend. Richard Matheson, who wrote some of the best Twilight novels, who wrote the book or short story Duel, that was one of Steven Spielberg's first movies. Richard Matheson, a godhead of the sci-fi horror field. Really important guy, up there with Ray Bradbury and the others. And I Am Legend, although it's never been made into a good movie ever, was an amazing novella that I recommend everybody read. But what it did was it broke down kind of the reality of the vampire myth, and it really dealt with the psychology of it. And it just was grittier and more real, more kind of like late 70s, like new American cinema, like Easy Rider, Midnight Cowboy. I really connected with it, and I said, we should do something like this. And one of the images I really wanted to have produced was the idea, and this I took from doing some research about where vampires came from and their original kind of the myths that helped to develop it from the 1500s and whatnot, was the idea of filing down your teeth to make fangs so that you could suck other people's blood. Basically, my concept was, let's make a vampire movie so realistic and gritty that we won't even call them vampires. They don't have any special powers. They can't read your mind or control your mind. They're just regular people who have gone crazy and have this bloodlust. And it's more of a psychological thing. Again, very much like the great gritty naturalist horror films of the 70s, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and so forth, Last House on the Left, movies like that. And
you're saying that your characters would actually file down their teeth like human beings that would just file their teeth in order to become better at sucking out blood? Or are we still on water at this point? Or
no,
are we already
the water
adapted to blood?
The water thing is ridiculous. I basically I don't think I ever even read the book that Tor gave me. But he loved what I was talking about because he's an extremely smart guy. I'm still very close with him to this day. He's one of my best friends. I'm very close with his family. His lovely wife, Micah, who's a playwright. Tor has gone on to be a producer and produces and directs and does all this stuff with commercials and things. Tor became something of a success himself. But anyway, so he's a close friend. He'll probably end up watching this. But is a great guy and is an amazing filmmaker. Makes commercials for big companies, car companies and whatnot, all this other stuff. But anyway, Tor loved the idea though of doing like a gritty, like realistic vampire movie from kind of that harkens back to the 60s or 70s, that kind of gritty Americana, type of film. Like again, Easy Rider or something like this, or, something with that kind of feel to it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He loved that idea. And so we started developing that. And I, was talking about I Am Legend and how that worked and some of my research I was doing, the psychology of it, the reality of it. And again, don't even call them vampires. They're not monsters. They're not supernatural. They're actual people.
They're psychopaths, essentially.
Exactly. And also, let's be honest, we were both 20, 21, 22. I don't remember. We didn't have, we didn't have that much money. We didn't have that much, resources or whatnot. This will also make it a lot easier. We don't have to have big special effects, whatever. Tor also had in his back pocket, because he was really good at kind of wheeling and dealing. Somehow he got this location that he wanted to shoot it at, which was this old abandoned hospital that they shot some of Nightmare on Elm Street in and a few other movies.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like used. There's this sort of coffee shop, Johnny's in LA, that a lot of people know about in Hollywood. They always shoot like movies when there's a coffee shop, like in Pulp Fiction or whatever. And so this hospital is kind of like that with a lot of horror films. Tor actually took me there. He knew the security guard. We actually got to take a tour of it. It's one of the scariest motherfucking places I've ever been to in my entire life. I actually wrote another script that I developed with Tor, like about the hospital. We wanted to do something with that, with like Ghost Hunters or something. That was many years later. But this hospital was really scary, and it gave me a lot of ideas. And I actually read Revelations in the Bible. And I read the original Exorcist, and I started reading all these real horror things and stories about terrible things that had happened. I really wanted to be very realistic and authentic and genuine. I wanted the horror to be something that can actually happen to make it scarier, but also again cheaper and easier, no special effects or whatnot. And we decided let's have it all take place in one night at this hospital. We kind of developed the idea of this pandemic that came that sort of made people kind of crazy or whatnot. This was well before.
Again, this isn't what's currently happening, just in case anyone's confused.
This was well before 28 Days Later. This was well before this entire kind of phenomenon that happened with vampires, which, by the way, is an important part of the story. We were a little too early, as it turned out. And
Mr. Wonderful actually in the comics just said, aren't we done with this whole vampire thing? And I just want to say we're talking about right now a movie that came out in 2009, and he's actually talking about what happened before that movie came out. So we're actually pre-vampire right now.
And it really is, trust me, for those listening or watching, that is an important part of the story and why things changed and why it became vampire, zombie, demon things instead of vampires. But we'll get there soon, I promise. So anyway, really trying my best to be concise, but this was
You're doing great. No, this is great. Keep going.
What happened was I was watching a lot of Twilight Zone. I got really into this amazing kind of combination horror soap opera thing that Lars von Trier made. He made this like weird TV series called The Kingdom, which Stephen King later ended up adapting for American television. Lars's he did for European television. It's also really good. I highly recommend that too. Lars von Trier, who of course did like Antichrist and Dogma, did all the Dogma films and Breaking the Waves and all these things. Melancholia, which is also very prescient for right now. But anyway, so I got really into that and just, more creepy, weird, realistic horror rather than supernatural. And I was living with this girl at the time in Long Beach. She was really crazy and weird and a lot of fun in a lot of ways, but also really nuts, of course, like my style. And so I was just living this kind of crazy life, very Charles Bukowski type of style and kind of living on the edge. And I was going through a lot of stuff at the time and drinking and smoking cigarettes and living with this crazy girl who was a musician and that whole thing, the like romanticized nostalgia de la boue, as they call it. Like I was like living that kind of like on the road lifestyle. And I actually ended up writing the script in 6 days. I wrote it very fast. I was reading Victor Hugo and all the other stuff, all this psychology stuff. So I did a lot of research and it just poured out of me when I finally sat down to write it. And I wrote it in 6 days. And I was really proud of it, and I thought it was really good. It was a horror movie that was more of a psychological thriller about vampires without ever calling them vampires. And it was more about the psychology of it. And really, it was about this group of people in this abandoned hospital in one night. That's why it was called Last Night, where outside the doors, the barricaded doors, the vampire pandemic is going on. Very similar, again, to I Am Legend, the original I Am Legend, the Matheson novella. And my thought was, not only could you make the vampires realistic and everything, but also like I wanted the horror to be very Twilight Zone-ish in that it's more about like they just are too scared to kill themselves. They are tired. They are in pain. They are hungry. They are dirty. They are itchy. There's no air conditioning. They're sweaty. They're smelly. They are done.
A real sense of desperation.
A real sense of desperation. Yeah, like real dystopian, end of the world. Like the only thing keeping them from killing themselves is that they're scared to do it. Like and that was where I wanted the horror to come from. I really wanted it to be like almost the vampire thing going on outside the doors doesn't even matter. Like they're done. Like they are going to die. They know it.
That could have equally as likely been a fire or like the acid from The Simpsons, the movie, the goggles, they do nothing. Yeah, exactly. But like in this case, it's vampires.
Or whatever, right? Out. I just really wanted to get into, and they're like dealing with themselves and they're kind of fighting amongst each other and sort of the Lord of the Flies thing takes over. And I really wanted it to be about what would happen if just the end is here. You know you're going to die, and you would much rather kill yourself than to go out and be eaten by the monsters outside. And those last hours where you're kind of figuring that out of like, how are we going to basically why don't we just kill ourselves? Why are we pretending? That was what I wanted the movie to be. That's what Last Night was going to be. And my friend Tor, who loved the script and was very supportive and helped me develop it. Great guy. Again, close friend of mine to this day. So 10, 15 years later, however long it's been. Because the movie came out in 2009, but we had been developing it.
This was like 2004 or 5, I assume, somewhere in there. Yeah.
As anybody knows, it takes a very long time to make a movie or get it made or whatever. So we tried to do it ourselves. We couldn't get the financing. Movies are extremely expensive, no matter what anybody tells you. They are not $10,000. They are $400,000 plus. Movies are very, very expensive, even very independent ones. So we had trouble raising that money. Surprised. We were 2 young kids. But Tor had some connections. He had done some producing and some stuff and worked with different people. So he passed it around, and we were getting really great feedback. I'll just say it. I could say if my shit sucks, like the final movie that does end up sucking. It was good. Trust me, it was good script. Just pretend like it was actually a really good script that we were getting really good feedback on. We were really confident. A lot of late nights, dinners and martinis and like this. We were like, we got something here. This is going to be one of those things. We're going to be This is going to be the next.
You got a lot of bites. You're just waiting for somebody to
we
get.
know it's going to happen. This is going to be like
Yeah.
an El Mariachi or something like that, or Slacker or Clerks or whatever. Like we got something that's going to be cheap and easy, and someone's going to make it. We're going to get $500,000 and go and make it, and our careers are going to get started. We knew it was going to happen. And, you know, kept getting passed around. And as happens in Hollywood then and now, it's a lot of circle jerk stuff. So everyone was loving it, taking us to dinner. But nobody was pulling the trigger. And finally, we ended up talking to, this is where some names are going to get left out. But we ended up talking to this one producer. He made some other people's careers. He was on some lots, the whole thing. And he loved the script and basically connected us with his assistant or associate producer or whatever the hell it is. They call them ass pros in Hollywood. But his associate producer got involved, and we were kind of meeting with him. And he said all the right things. He referenced Twilight Zone. He said, we love how realistic this is. We love how gritty this is. This is like a horror movie from the 70s. Well, all the stuff that like we had like clearly put into this thing to make it that way. And we were loving it. And he was so into it. And like, we're going to make this and we want to keep it the way that it is. But anyway, I get there soon. And so we're believing them. We're the two young, bright-eyed 22-year-old kids. Oh boy, we get to make our movie and so forth. And we put so much into it and so much research, so much love and passion. And we're gonna make something new.
It's going to be a true expression of your art.
It's going to be a true expression of my art. It's gonna be real and gritty and authentic. And we're walking around the movie lot and seeing famous people. It was, there's a reason cliches are cliche. It was totally cliche. And if it had been the 80s, there would have been some buxom blonde secretary, waiting in the office afterwards. But anyway, the point of the story is everything was going great. And they were specifically saying all the things we wanted them to say. And we hadn't told them any of that. I mean, the references to Twilight Zone, all that. Then they go, we got one problem with it. I go, what? He goes, do you have any idea how many projects are coming out in the next year or two that have to do with vampires? We're like, no. And it was literally like Twilight, True Blood, the adaptation of I Am Legend for real. Like the list, and we're like, oh no. Like by the time we get this made and it comes out, there's gonna be super saturation of vampires. It can't be vampires. We need to make some changes. Can you do something? And of course, we're like, yeah. We'll make them demons. Yeah. Who cares?
It'll still be my movie. They just won't be vampires.
Right. Especially because again, for those in the cheap seats, it wasn't even about the vampires. It was about like the terror and horror and the existential fear of you're going to die and just those last hours before you know you're going to die. So like, who gives a shit what's out the door? Like it doesn't even matter anymore. So we're like, sure, we'll change it around, whatever you want. We don't care. Hooray! More free sandwiches, please. And we're really hungry. Don't have any money.
I'll take another martini, dry, shaken, not stirred.
Yeah. So, we try to work with them and blah 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 blah. But they bought the good news is they bought the script. They bought it for almost nothing, but for two crazy kids, it was it was money, and we got paid for a script. And it was great. I got the full writing credit. My friend Tor Canos was going to be a producer on it. Everyone was going to be happy. Everyone was going to win. Again, like our careers are about to start. Hooray. And then nothing happens for like a year and a half. We don't hear it.
You get the check, it clears, and then
nothing. And I don't remember exactly how it worked or why, but I think we tried to get in touch with them. We didn't hear anything, or we were working on other things, or we were kind of still cocky enough to be like, okay, that one's sold. Let's go on to our next one. Or for whatever reason, there was no real communication between we and the team that was going to actually produce the film. And so about like, I think a year and a half later, I get an email or a phone call or whatever from that associate producer guy. And he says, hey, let me take you out to dinner. I've got some good news for you. And I'm like, great, So he takes me to dinner, and I will never forget this. I remember it so well. Takes me to this, again, classic cliche, the player, the big picture with Kevin Bacon, the whole thing. It really is like that. It really is like that. There's a reason those movies keep getting made ever since film started. It's always been like this. So we're eating this dinner. It's this expensive dinner. I'm assuming he's going to be paying for it because I'm ordering all this shit. Again, I'm like, I've been eating cereal for the last year and a half. Like, finally, a real meal, and I'm going to get.
I'll take a lobster stuffed with steak, please.
Come on, man. Right? I assume. So, I'm eating good food. I'm having some drinks, and he is spending the entire time telling me about all of his dream projects that he wants to do. That has nothing to do with my movie. And he's like, and how he wants to make a movie out of the film, out of the TV show and the toys, Mask, the little cars that turn into robots or whatever. It was kind of like a Transformer knockoff and all these other.
But like the movie, like Jim Carrey movie, The Mask? Is that what you're talking about?
No. Something completely different. There's actually many movies and IP called Mask. There's also that Eric Stoltz movie.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Mask. Yeah, Mask is many a thing. But there was in the 80s this horrible cartoon series. It was literally I don't know how else to describe it except it was Transformers light. It was cars that turn into like robot monster Voltron things. And this guy wanted to make a movie out of that. It was like his life dream, which was sort of pathetic.
Was this man named Michael Bay?
No, oh man, much better dinner. So he's telling me about that and all these other crazy ideas for movies and all this other stuff. And nothing about my movie, nothing about me. I'm just kind of sitting there kind of wondering what's going on, enjoying the free food, enjoying the free drinks. We're at this nice place. Everyone's beautiful, whatever. Again, just like glad to be out of my shitty apartment, staring at the wall, wondering how I'm ever going to get any money. And finally, we finish dinner. We go to the valet to get he did pay for the dinner. We go to the valet.
Which is like.
Yeah. Oh, at that point, it was God knows how much, especially in LA where everything is 10 times as much as it should be. But so we go to the valet and we're waiting for our cars. And he literally, again, never forget, he goes, so I got some good news and bad news about your movie. I'm like, okay, finally. But also, the red flags waving. It's like, boy, you sure waited till the last minute.
You waited till literally I'm about to step into a car. Yeah.
So he goes, the good news is we're going to make your movie. Hooray. Okay, great. It's greenlit. He goes, you're going to get a little bit more money, blah, 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 because it's going to go into production. So you get a percentage of that, etc. Fantastic. Question number 2. What's the bad news? He goes, Steven wants to be in it. Now, one of the things that the boutique company did was they made, one of their bread and butter things was they made straight to DVD, straight to video movies with Seagal, with Wesley Snipes, like all those Art of War movies and stuff. Jean-Claude Van Damme. I say more?
Basically the action section of any blockbuster in the early 2000s.
100%. Anyone who's our age will know exactly what genre of movie I'm talking about. It was a genre itself. They made all those movies. Fine. Everyone's got to pay the bills. In addition to like a couple, they made, in all fairness, they made a few other actual movies. And again, the main producer guy at the top, he started some people's careers whose names you would know and have won a lot of awards and such since. And was why we were excited more so than just our movie's going to get made. It's going to get made by that guy who made these other people who became very important and not just famous and big, but like good filmmakers that we've respected. I still respect to this day some of them. Anyway, but to pay the bills, they also made Art of War 4 and whatever Steven Seagal movie was out that year. And I literally go, and I go, what part would he play? Because there was no character in it. Steven Seagal had. It's
like nobody in my movie does martial arts. No. Not even bad martial arts.
You're like it was like I gave him the script for My Dinner with Andre, and he's like, "Hey, Steven Seagal wants to be in it." I'm like, what? This is?
Yeah, he's gonna play the maitre d'.
There's like I literally said, "What part is he gonna play?" There's no Steven Seagal character in it. Like these are like tired, broken down, skinny, starving, like weak, like nerdy, like losery, like we're gonna die people, not Steven Seagal. And he goes, so Steven wants to rewrite it. And again, I'm like, okay, I guess I know he's a writer, but whatever. And once again, heard very little from then on in. I think it was like another year before I heard from them again. Again, as usual, as you do in Hollywood, as we all do, because we're all prostitutes out there. That's the main industry, is whoring yourself. I took a check and ran, and was like, all right, whatever, got something going. And also, I will say, I really do. I write very fast. I write a lot. I probably had 7 other scripts that were out there at the time. I was optioning things. I did in my early 20s. I actually did okay in LA. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. It's just important to understand, like, you know, that was how I operated. It was like, okay, this one's going to get made. I got some money. I've got other things going. Like, it made sense to me at the time to just like, okay, I'll let that one go. Even though I put a lot into it and really loved the script, at the end of the day, it was a 6-day script, and you know, whatever happens to it, fine. And
it's not the only egg in your basket, so you don't feel like it's got to be like, you know, nurtured and hatched
right.
or whatever.
It's like it'll be what it'll be. And meanwhile, I've got like actual dream projects that I'm working on and trying to do that I wouldn't want anyone to touch. But this one will at least pay my bills for the next 6 months. Great. So I just kind of let it go, and I think it was like another year or something before I heard anything again. They were going to go shoot it in Romania, which is sort of like the Malaysia of the film industry. It's where they go to shoot stuff because it's really cheap and easy, and there's no unions and all that other kind of stuff like that. So it's the same way that, like, you know, Nike or Amazon or most other American corporations make all their stuff in other countries so that they could pay people 10 cents a day. You know, a lot of films were, at least at the time, were shooting stuff in Romania. And they even asked if I wanted to go, but I'd have to pay my own way and whatever they gave me.
Really?
Yeah, of course. They gave me, I'm only the writer. They did give me like the director chair back, you know, so, and I gave it to my dad. And so there is somewhere in the world, somewhere at my dad's house, maybe, if he didn't give it away or sell it on eBay, a thing that says Last Night. It was actually really cool logo with like bullet shots in it and blood. And it says writer Matthew Klickstein. And that was like my director's chair back then.
That's pretty awesome in its own right.
That's why I gave it to my dad. I'm like, here you go, Dad. Like, see, like, I'm not a total fuck up. But again, I'm sure he lost it or gave it away or sold it or something. But so I did get that, but I didn't get to go and see it shot or anything. So I don't know anything about this movie. I don't know what's going on. I haven't seen anything about it. I haven't heard anything about it. It's also very important, especially for younger viewers, listeners, or whatever, who probably stopped watching and listening a long time ago because they can't pay attention for too long. And but the point is, you know, there's no internet really. There's no social media really. I think this is like Facebook had just happened, maybe like a couple years before. Like there wasn't.
So like 2006, 2007 is when this is probably happening.
Maybe 2008. It was right when that stuff started getting big. But like there wasn't like the way it is now, where every aspect of every film and TV show you can see every shot and who's in it and interviews with the stars. There was no.
The Rock is live on Instagram telling you about what he shot that day.
Yeah. Sure. There was nothing. So even somebody who was involved in it intricately, like myself, I had no idea what was going on, and they weren't really talking to me. And at the time, I was, you know, young and dumb and naive, and I didn't want to rock the boat, and I was dealing with other stuff, and I wasn't really pushing for it, so I really had no idea what was going on. And then, you know, I saw the IMDb page went up, and I was excited. I think they spelled my name wrong or something. And then they decided to call it Against the Dark. Why Against the Dark? Well, a few reasons. One is most Steven Seagal movies are 3 names. Out for Justice.
Oh my gosh, I never noticed that before.
Death. You know, Shall I Go?
Above the Law, Beyond the Law. Yeah, The Perfect Weapon, The Asian Connection, Code of Honor. Wow,
they tend to be three words.
I've never noticed that before. That's fascinating. Little inside secret right there.
Number 2, this is the big one. As you said, back then the Netflix of life was Blockbuster movies. Everybody went to Blockbuster to get your videos, and you went into the Blockbuster, and it was just sprawling shelves of films. And whatever the new releases were that week or month or whatever, they would have a huge shelf for it as soon as you came in. And just like with AAA plumbing or whatever in the Yellow Pages, Against the Dark starts the letter A. So it'll be the first thing you see when you walk in. They actually told me that was the reason they called it that. Now, I will admit, I actually think it's a pretty cool name, so I'll let them have it. So I wasn't that pissed off, although I really liked Last Night. I thought that was like simple and clear and whatever. But obviously,
well, and they went through the effort of making a chair with the logo on it. I mean, come on.
You know, and also turned out, of course, not surprisingly, there were other movies before and during and after called Last Night. So, you know, and even though people clearly don't have a problem coming out with the movies with the same name, we just went through some like Mask or whatever.
Mask, yeah.
Anywhere, The Kid or whatever it is, Lost World. But anyway, so so now it's gonna be Against the Dark. Okay, whatever. So right away I'm like, we'll see what happens. So now Seagal's in it. It's called something else. I have no idea what's going on with it. I'm moving. I'm like, well, see what happens. Hey, and again, through this process, you have to remember, I'm still 23, 24. You know, friends of mine I graduated with are lucky to be working at Starbucks. Most of them have gone back home to Missouri or wherever they're from. You know, other people that I know, are again, like just kind of killing themselves on set as PAs or whatever. I'm doing a lot of that too. But meanwhile, I'm special because I have a movie coming out and it's coming out through Sony Pictures. And, you know, Steven Seagal's a joke, but he's still someone you've heard of and whatever. So
I mean, and in 2009, he was not, I mean, he's become more of a joke the longer the man lives, exactly. I'll say. Right. But like he still had an ounce of credibility in the action genre back then.
Right. So it was something. It was somebody. It was like, okay, you know, I still have some hope that there'll be something worth salvaging here. And again, the money, you know, certainly wasn't much, but for young Don,
you could afford cereal for a while.
It was living off of cereal. It paid for a lot of cereal. I think when I've treated myself, I got a peanut butter sandwich every now and then. Obviously, a lot of that's changed. Woo! But anyway, the point of story there is, so the movie's coming along, and blah, blah, and I remember seeing the trailer for it finally. I'd actually left LA. A lot of other things happened, but I finally was just done with LA. The writer's strike happened in 2008. I was actually supposed to work with the same team on another movie that I had written a treatment for that they really liked, that I was really proud of. It was going to be another kind of crappy straight-to-DVD action film. It was actually going to be a sequel of another movie you've definitely heard of and are definitely familiar with. It would have been part of a very, like, let's just say this. It wasn't Leprechaun, and it was not Basket Case, but it wasn't Leprechaun, but it was like, it might as well have been. It was of that ilk, and it was going to be in that. And again, I was like, okay, now I know the process. Like, this is just going to be schlock, like, you know, let me write something, get paid. And it would have been like 50 grand or something this time. It would have been some actual money, like, you know, I wrote a lot of cereal now, a lot of peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah, you could definitely spend 6 days writing something you know that you're not going to have to care that much
about. I know the process. Yeah, so it's like, oh,
yeah,
you know, no more research and all that. Like, fuck being an artist. I'm trying to get paid. You know, it's like,
who needs integrity?
It's Wu-Tang time, you know. It's like cash rules everything, you know. But it just, you know, now it's time to do it. But anyway, so dollar bills, and just you know, I'm like, let's just do it. Let me make some money. So and then the writer's strike happened, and it all got canceled. And my roommate, who was working for Sony, funnily enough, also totally coincidentally, got laid off. And just things got really tough, and we knew the strike was going to be happening for a long time. Production stuff. It was actually very much like right now. It was almost like a lockdown. There's not going to be any business happening in LA. It was affecting the limo industry. It was affecting Starbucks because now there's not going to be meetings there. The mayor of LA wrote an open letter to the film industry that was published in the LA Times, like, please, like, start production back up. Like, you're going to kill the community.
We need you. Yeah.
Like the industry of Los Angeles was shutting down. And I was one of the many victims of that, as was my roommate. And I remember thinking, though, it's like, now's the time to leave. I always hated LA. I hated the traffic. I hated no parking. I hated all the driving. I hated the people, you know, with a passion. Just awful people. Some of the worst people you've ever met are in LA. That is a true cliche. We all knew how terrible Ellen was, and trust me, you're going to be hearing about a lot of other people now too. Some people that are going to surprise you, but just awful.
It's just all going to keep coming out.
Yeah, it's because, and you know, people don't care anymore. NDAs don't mean anything anymore. There's one in particular who I know is going to get bounced soon, and it's going to surprise a lot of people, but because she's just such a terrible person. But anyway,
interesting.
So just LA was just filled with awful people. And again, like, I was PAing, and I knew people who were PAing, and I knew people who were agents, you know, assistants and things. Like, we were like the indentured servants. We were like the Fight Club people. Like, you know, we were wiping, you know, the people's asses and doing all this stuff. So we knew how terrible they all were. They were awful people. 3 a.m. go get my cantaloupe, or, you know, go. You know, it was just awful people. I hated it. I really hated LA. It really is a terrible place. And so I'm like, all right, the writer's strike's happening. This is a sign. It's time to leave. I literally sold everything that I owned. I sold my car. I sold all my DVDs. I gave away all my books. I sold all my CDs, when you could still make some money doing that. And I left. And I went and stayed with a friend in Portland for a little while, trying to figure some shit out. I saw the trailer, in the spare room that he gave me on his shitty broken futon that was literally against the wall that was against an elevator that was going up and down all day long. And back to the bohemian life. Here we are in Portland, no less. Before the Portlandia thing happened, all that. Back when Portland was still kind of, a little bit on the edge or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, and I remember seeing the trailer on my computer and being like, oh my God, there it is. And I was so excited. And, clearly it was totally different than anything I'd originally envisioned. But
was your name in the trailer? Like, did it pop up and be like written by Matthew Klickstein?
That's a good question. I don't remember if it was in the trailer. I'm sure it exists somewhere online. I don't remember if it was in the trailer, but I mean, I had sole writing credit on IMDb and everything. And I knew it, and on the Sony website, and I'm going to be getting right. There was never a question I wasn't going to get writing credit. The only question, and I still wasn't really thinking about it because I was still so bedazzled by the whole thing, and also leaving LA and figuring out my life.
You had a lot in your mind and on your plate.
This happened in a really, again, bringing it back to Fight Club. It's like this happened in a really strange time of my life. Really when my life kind of started anew and led to all the craziness that's happened now. Although I'd probably put one more chapter break when the Nickelodeon book came out for many, many reasons. But anyway, this was definitely a chapter break in my life. And I'm seeing the trailer for this film. And you have to remember, again, I'm still maybe 25. I'm a kid, more or less. I'd made some short films. I'd worked on some films and TV. I'd PA'd. I'd done this. I'd done that. But this is whoa, a trailer that is slick and clean and good and Steven Seagal, but still
has a Steven Seagal in it, yeah.
A name person. And I'm like, oh my, and I could see that some of the characters at least looked like how I wrote them, and their names were the names that I had used. I'm like, oh my God, that's kind of cool. So, I was again just mesmerized and sort of gobsmacked in a good way by the whole thing. And okay, this is real. This is happening at least. And again, at a time when I didn't have much money and I'm trying to figure out my life, okay, maybe I'll get something out of this that could lead to other things. So I ended up leaving Portland, and I actually took this crazy job for a couple months where I was pitching. I was a huckster for some alternative summer or spring break thing at colleges. I was one of those people who pulled you aside and hey kid, you want to do something good this summer? Go and feed starving children and wherever, something like that as your summer break or your spring break or something like that. I took this job doing that mainly because it would allow me to travel and because the money seemed decent and I really had nothing else, going on that was a little bit more rock solid. And I thought, okay, if I do this, this will allow me to maybe travel a little bit, get a little money in my pocket and figure out some other shit. Because it was, at that time, anybody would tell you, it's probably still the case, it was very difficult getting work in Portland. Portland's it's actually a very small, very crowded town. And one of the big problems with it is, and aside from being very expensive even then, was that it's just very hard to find work, even stuff like working at coffee shops or restaurants or whatever, because everyone's trying to get that work. I was actually friends with this gal who was a recruiter, and I would go to these recruiting parties she had literally for the free food. She and I became really good friends, and I would help her with it and whatever. And I would meet people who were PhDs and people who, this one guy had worked at some corporate coffee shop headquarters. And in Portland, he was lucky to get a job working at the coffee shop itself. He went from making six figures to $6. And I realized how difficult it would be to get work in Portland. It was very, very tough. It probably still is, maybe now even worse. Well, right now it's all on fire, but that's a whole other thing. So, so the point of, it was time to leave. So I took this job. So I'm out traveling around the country pitching this damn thing. And my movie comes out. It's in, stores. It's in Blockbusters. And at this time, there are Blockbusters everywhere.
Did it get a theatrical release or did it go straight to okay.
It might have played. I mean, there really wasn't limited type things at that time necessarily. I think it might have played. It's on Box Office Mojo as having made some kind of box office something or other.
I read that it had a wide release, so that to me, I wasn't certain.
Especially on the internet, especially by media, press stuff put out by film companies. I know
sure.
There's a lot of information, on the IMDb page, for example, that is not correct, not true. And that goes with everything. Don't believe everything you read, kids, especially on the internet. But anyway, because sometimes I'm the person who helps to, write stuff that's not true about stuff, but it makes good money for that. But anyway,
it's not true. It's just spun to be alternatively true, right?
It's for fiction. It's another perspective on reality. Anyway, So it's in stores, and at that time there's Blockbusters everywhere. They're as ubiquitous as Subways are now. And I mean Subway, the horrible sandwich shop, not the Underground Railroads or whatever.
Railroad.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah, I know what you meant.
you know what
Yeah.
and so so there's Blockbusters everywhere. So I see that it's out. I'm very excited, but I'm traveling around the country and I'm in all these motels and things, so I can't like watch it at that time. Like I don't even think I had a DVD player or whatever on my computer or something, so I can't see this movie. And they're not like sending me a link or whatever.
There's no digital streaming or anything of that nature.
And I'm like, and every day, and even if they wanted to like mail me a DVD or something anyway, like I'm in a different motel like every day.
You don't have an address.
Yeah, I'm on the road. I really am on the road for like a few months, right when this thing happened. I'll never forget. I got a call from, again, my old roommate that I'm still close with to this day. The guy got laid off from Sony. He since got his job back there after the strike was over. And I put him on speakerphone in my car, and he's there with another friend of ours, and they are giggling like two schoolgirls. And they are laughing their asses off. I can tell that they're drunk and probably stoned and God knows what. And I go, what's going on, guys? And they're like, we just watched your movie. Oh, my God. And I'm like, how was it? And the first thing they said was, how many helicopters did you write into this script? And I went, none. I didn't write any helicopters. And they were just laughing. And I'm like, click. And I'm like, oh, no. So, I'm trying to figure out a way to see this damn movie. And a friend of mine at the time, he ran this DVD website back when that was such a thing. And he told me, he goes, hey, your movie's out. I want to write about it. Let me do an interview with you. And I went, sure, that's fine. I could talk about some of these crazy adventures and kind of do like what I'm doing now. And he goes, there's one catch. So I go, what? He goes, I need you to see it. Surprise, like I can't have you talk about your movie without having. It's
going to be hard to talk about it if you haven't seen it. Sure.
I go, man, I'm traveling. I'm at all these motels. He's like, I don't care. Like, like if you want me to do the interview. And it really was this really big website at the time, back when there was like 10 big websites. He had one of them. It went defunct a few years later. It was a DVD website. I mean, who cares? So he really he was like, figure it out a way. And by a wild coincidence, one of the hotels or motels that I was in, next in El Paso, Texas, I'll never forget. Nice hotel. They had a library where you can rent VHSs actually and DVDs and VCRs in every room. So I'm like, oh my God, I can get my movie. And I went, for some reason I couldn't find a Blockbuster. I know that they were all over, but there was a Best Buy. And I went to the Best Buy, and there it is. There's the wall up against the dark. And, again, a little bit of like, it's kind of cool. Like, okay.
Hey, yeah.
Artwork is terrible, and it's a lot of Steven Seagal, but whatever. It's fine. So I buy it, and I did get to play the, cute girl at the cashier in the Best Buy. Really, 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 really good-looking gal. And she's, I think I might have gotten a few other things, too, some pencils or whatever. And she bings the rings up the DVD, and I couldn't help myself. It's my first time getting to do something like this. My only time.
By the way, I wrote that.
I got to go, hey, you want to see? This is what I go. I was this slick. Again, please, everybody. I'm like 25, 26. I think I'd had sex maybe twice in my life up to this point. I went, hey, you want to see something kind of cool? She goes, what? And I took out my license and I turned around the DVD and there it is. There's my name written by Matthew Klickstein, right? Really small. And I showed her my license. She's kind of looking at it and she's like kind of having some trouble understanding what I'm trying to say. And I'm like, look, I wrote this. She's like, you did?
She's like, that guy's name's kind of spelt like yours.
Exactly. Matthew with one T. And I'm like, and she's like, oh my God, you did. And she kind of does like, hey, everybody, he wrote this. And that was kind of cool. And I won't go into so much more detail because, boy, this has already been so long. But I got to do moments like that. Otherwise, like throughout the next few months, like when I'd go, it was nice on dates because there was always a Blockbuster. And I'd be like, hey, after a few drinks, like, let's go cross street to Blockbuster. I want to show you something kind of cool. And I would do
that was your closing move.
Never worked, by the way. Never closed the deal. But it was always still kind of fun because, I don't know if you've seen what I look like, but anyway.
Hey, baby, you want to see my writing credits?
Exactly. So yeah, it didn't really work, but it was still kind of fun to do. And I was getting like emails and things from friends of mine around the country with pictures of the wall of Against the Dark everywhere in all these different states because I had friends all over, as I still do now. And so that part of it was fun. So anyway, here we are. I'm in my hotel room. I pop in the DVD. I start watching it. There's my name. There are characters in it who I named and I kind of described aside from Steven Seagal's character. And boy, anyone who's stayed on this long, I hate to tell you, but it's not so bad it's good. It is just
that's the problem with
movie.
it, dude. I'm a huge fan of bad movies. Like,
it's really boring.
Yeah,
it's really boring.
And
like after in it for about 5 minutes, it's like Executive Decision or something. He's in it for about 5 minutes. And Miles, I don't know if you are aware of this or saw trivia about it. I wasn't even aware of it. Not only is he big and fat and like, you know, only in it for 5 minutes. Apparently they dubbed all the lines. Like that's not even
well, and it's apparently his stunt double who's actually predominantly in the film. Like most of the shots that are Steven Seagal are actually Steven Seagal's stunt double, and he's just in it for a few close-ups.
It's just I've seen it all the way through once in all these years. I don't own a copy of it. It rarely comes up in conversation. I'm most of the time, especially these days when Seagal is so incredibly hated. Actually good reasons. He's done some pretty shitty things over the last few years, but you know, it's just not something that comes up. I sometimes waver whether I should put it on a resume. I've gone back and forth on my website. You know, so
I'm gonna make an Against the Dark drinking game, and one of these Fridays we'll have to just play that. I'll get some people that want to join us, and we'll play together as we watch the film. We're actually getting real low on time, and I want to leave you time to plug all of your current projects. But I got to ask just a couple of quick questions. Sure. First, character in the film that is closest to what you wrote.
Good question. Charlie. Charlie, the little girl in it. That's how I wanted her to look. That's how I wanted her to act. The backward hat. When I saw that in the trailer, there was a moment.
You got excited.
They got it. Yeah, my wife and I, if we ever have a daughter, we're going to name her Charlie, by the way. I've always really liked that name. And I did not know, I had not seen Firestarter yet. So I thought I was being kind of cool by her name being Charlotte and them calling her Charlie. I did not know that that was the name of the girl in Firestarter. So that's a fun coincidence.
That's cool. Very cool. Did you ever actually get to physically read Steven Seagal's rewrite? I mean, obviously you saw the film, but did you ever get like the paper script?
I doubt there ever was one. I mean, I will say, just because it needs to be said, and I don't think it's been clear, that I did not write that movie. I mean, that's that. At the end of the day, that is not my movie at all. It is a completely different film in almost every regard. Obviously with the army stuff, the helicopters and all that, like the whole point was basically they're like in this one place they can't get out, and I wanted to be claustrophobic and all that stuff. There were a couple of lines, and I think it's important to say, I know we're running out of time, but I just think it's kind of cool. There were a couple lines they did keep in and were my little like kind of like idiosyncratic Matt things. One is I was really a big fan of the movie Crumb at the time, about the underground artist R. Crumb, and his daughter's name is Sophie. And at one point in his documentary, he says, "My darling daughter Sophie." So there's a line in Against the Dark where the doctor guy, the crazy Dr. Jekyll guy toward the end goes, "My darling daughter Sophie." I wrote that line, and it was a reference to Crumb. And as one of my friends said, "Oh boy, now all 4 people who've seen your film in Crumb will know that line." The one other in that scene where he says, "My friend Fergus," and all this stuff about like meat and everything, that was because I just read this book, a cookbook called From Nose to Tail by a guy named Fergus Henderson, who was sort of like a precursor to Anthony Bourdain. And he was this very controversial, kind of crazy chef guy who wrote these cookbooks in a way that you can actually kind of read them. They were kind of weird and nutty. And so that's why he makes the reference to Fergus. So I was able to sneak into this horrible Steven Seagal movie a reference to this weird, crazy chef guy named Fergus Henderson and a reference to R. Crumb's daughter, Sophie Crumb. So that was my one, like, hey, at least I got that in there.
That's pretty. I mean, that's cool that you actually have words that you wrote in a movie that was at Blockbuster. Let's say that's pretty. That's pretty big for people.
I've written a line. Who are you? I'm the motherfucker who's gonna chop off your head, or I don't know, whatever it was. That's a fun. Wow, that's some Dirty Harry shit right there.
Yeah. It is interesting that your movie went from being like a claustrophobic, like gritty, locked in a room together, what the hell is going to happen, to no, let's have Steven Seagal and a sword and at least multiple helicopters. So
many logistical errors, and so like in the credits, those girls who are with them are called attendants, whatever that means. And yes, you get through the whole movie, and this comes up in all the awful reviews of it. And it's like, are they vampires? Are they demons? Are they zombies?
Zombies.
They never say what they are, ever.
Yeah, it never really gets very clear at all. Last question, and then we'll have to plug your stuff and call it a day for this one. But I would love to know, what was your original ending in your script?
My original ending was actually a bit like the end of Night of the Living Dead. A couple of the couple of survivors come out. I think there's like one or two. I think it's Dorothy or something. And I want it to be like the whole movie has been dark and there's no lights and it's shadows and things. And then they come outside and it is like nuclear white, like a heaven-wide blast of light. And they kind of have to like go like this because they've been inside for so long. And it is just really light and bright. And honestly, it's a good question. I actually don't remember the specifics, but I remember basically it was the idea of either, I think it turns out they got the disease too, or they get killed or something. I remember I wanted to be like kind of quick and easy and very like Treasure Sierra Madre or the end of Night of the Living Dead, where it's like none of it mattered anyway. Like I wanted to have this very nihilistic, like they get outside, they're out there, and boom, they get killed or so, it was something like that. It was a very like nihilistic, again, 70s kind of, it's Chinatown type of ending, or like French Connection or something like that, which I did get to keep for my graphic novel that just came out, You Are Obsolete, that ends in a similar way where it's like none of it mattered anyway because none of it matters.
So you got to bring it back to a future project, at least. At least Steven Seagal didn't ruin your ending for that.
Right, exactly. The whole thing.
Well, Matt, as always, man, I truly am. I'm just a big fan of your work. I think you do a lot of really incredible stuff, and I'm so grateful to you for coming on to the show and shitting on your own project, essentially, today. I know that that's not the film that you wrote, but that is the film that got made, and oh boy, was it a doozy.
I'm so glad it happened. I will say I'm glad it happened, and I'm grateful that my friend Tor Canos, who got me on this road, had me just get going with it at all. We've been the best of friends over the years. I hope to work with him on other things. We've worked kind of on other little things over the years. The people who worked with me, that original associate producer, was a bit of a goofball, but I think ultimately a nice guy. We had tried to do other things over the years that never came to anything. I think I'm still connected to him on LinkedIn or something. It's the one social media thing I use. So, it was what it was. And I got paid some money for a silly script that I wrote that was 6 pages long. And I get to say I wrote not only a Steven Seagal movie, but his one horror film ever. And it does, sometimes I'll have a friend who'll be like, oh, I was talking to somebody and I was in England or France, or someone was in somewhere in Africa even, and on some safari or something, and was talking to somebody. They were, oh, there's a Steven Seagal movie called Against the Dark. And he was like, I wrote that. But it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up. Yeah, I wrote that piece of shit. I don't know.
That's fantastic. Well, you've got a lot of other really awesome projects people can check out. I know you've got your website, MatthewKlickstein.com. Is there any other plugs that you'd like to share before you get out of here?
Yeah, and MatthewKlickstein.com with one T. I'm sure you'll put a link to it or whatever it is. I do have a children's book, actually, my first, coming out at the end of September. The Kids of Whitney Junior High Take Over the World. Great book. We're trying to do some virtual events and stuff for that now. We had some live event stuff that we were trying to do but didn't work out. It involves a group of young kids with disabilities in a rock band. It's based on a real thing called the Kids of Whitney High, which some people might be familiar with from the movie The Ringer and some other things like that. And some of the profits from the book are going to go to a nonprofit that work with the kids. I'm still very close to the Kids of Whitney High. I've worked with them for over 20 years. And also a lot of other people with disabilities and stuff like that. It's just something I've always done. I really enjoy working with groups of people like that on art things and theater things and movie things. With the Kids of Whitney High stuff, we're going to be trying to re-release a documentary we made about them a few years ago. I can't say any names or anything, but we do have some interested partners in how that will happen. Nothing too big. But something should be happening with that. The book comes out, Kids of Whitney Junior High Take Over the World, September 28th. I just had a graphic novel come out, You Are Obsolete, through Aftershock Comics. I'm actually doing a signing tomorrow. It'll probably be too late by the time this airs, but at a comic book shop in Indianapolis, the oldest comic book shop in the Midwest, Comic Carnival. And a few other projects I'm working on. I'm working on a project for SiriusXM that I can't really talk about right now, but it's going to be my next big pop culture history project. I'm really excited about it. That'll probably be launching next spring. And a few other things. Go to my website. I'm always doing a million things because nothing I do ever makes much money, and I have to do a million things at once.
And he's got to afford a cereal.
Yeah, and I have an unbounded energy, and I don't really watch TV. I don't play video games. I'm not on social media. I don't watch sports. I don't really pay attention to the news. I just write and read and watch movies and go to the gym and spend time with my friends. And even that, I don't really do much of. So I just work and do a lot of stuff, and so a lot of it comes out, and sometimes I get some money for it, and that's nice. So it's a tough life, but it's the life I lead, and that's what it is. So go to my damn website and buy some of my shit.
I'm glad you do it, man. Thank you again so much for being here. Everybody go and visit MatthewKlickstein.com to follow all of his great projects. You can follow me online everywhere at Mr. Most Days Off, and I'll be back again next week right here on Get Vocal. I'm going to be talking about scare acting, and I've got a panel of other scare actors going to be joining me, so really excited to talk about that. I will see you next week, and until next time, be cromulent to each other.